Hey everyone. So yeah, it's a Saturday hangout. First one. We may do these at least once a month moving forward, depending on how it goes. So if y'all have any questions, I've got a few that were already shot over. Um, we'll talk about those. I am actually joined today by the infamous Paco Sanchez. Paco, say hi.
No.
Say it.
No.
Say it.
Hey.
There we go. Don't you feel better? Anyway, so obviously today is going to be a lot more just kind of kicking back, hanging out. We'll answer questions and, talk back and forth for a little bit. And Paco may say one or two things from here or there.
It may never be brought up on the show again.
Right. Probably never again. I did this against my better judgment. So, any hoozle. Let's, hey, Brunson and Susan. So let's actually start off with a question from MH1953. She sent in these. I don't know that she can be live tonight. We'll kick off with her question, and then we'll go from there. I believe the Rapture Events are a pattern of the Jewish wedding. Yeshua going to prepare a place for us, him not knowing the hour or the day or hour of the rapture, it only being when the Father sets it's time, coming like a thief, taking us by surprise, etc., etc. What do you think about it? Paco, I'll let you start off. What do you think? Are all the events around the rapture, is this all pattern after the Jewish feast or Jewish wedding festival? What are you thinking?
So here's the thing, right? Like, I'm not going to say no. And you know why I'm not going to say no. And
Right.
It's because I think it's very explicit within the Bible itself that we're not supposed to know. Yes, we should know the signs. Yes, we should be aware of, when it looks to be. But I have specifically stated to you multiple times, I am going to stay out of that. I don't want to pretend to believe that that's the case. Now, having said that, is it patterned? Yeah. It looks like it is. It feels like it is, and we're certainly seeing things that would line up within that context. But I mean, you're the man of the hour all the time, bud. So why don't you wax philosophical on that for us?
Well, I would argue that whether or not the rapture, these things are all patterned after the Jewish marriage, festivities. I would say yes. I mean, that's just for me. It's not even really a question. It's actually it's actually very much embedded in the imagery. Jesus used the imagery of a bridegroom coming for a bride, the 10 virgins waiting, with the oil. It's like it's all kind of there. Also, I personally, I'd see Battle of Armageddon. Right, we see this call for the animals, the birds of the air to come and to feast, and God Himself even calls it like the feast of the Lord. Like it's like, so the idea that being sort of this sort of culmination of these events with the feast, I'm right there. Now the question is, for me, where a lot of people say, well, there's some things about Jewish festivals, and so it's like, so the rapture has to be at the beginning of the 7 years, because a wedding feast was a week long, and so that's the 7 years. It happens at the beginnings because you can't know when it was happening. The thing is, archaeologically speaking, there's a lot of this stuff that is actually put out there that has no real basis in history. The idea of a wedding feast being a week long, absolutely a thing. That was true. So that lines up with this idea that no one knew when the wedding was going to happen. That's a stretch. I'm sorry, I can't find any good archaeological data for that. I can't find anyone who actually said this is how it works. Like, just on some random day, your husband, your betrothed shows up, is like yoink, and just disappears. This is all stuff that people have read into it. But the thing is, I also look at the wedding, and I go back to, I look at the feast days. Right, we've got the last 3 feasts for Jesus to fulfill is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. For those of us who are, maybe more English speaking like me, that's the Feast of Trumpets and Atonement, and then Tabernacles. There is a week between the Feast of Trumpets and Feast of Yom Kippur, or I'm sorry, Atonement, and so which is also Yom Kippur. And so my personal feeling is that the Feast of Trumpets is the rapture event, right? That's what it's doing, right? And so that's what it foretells. That's what that's about. There's a week in between, right? So I kind of think it's actually a literal week for that, not necessarily 7 years. So that's it. Like I said, the pattern of, but again, the primary thing is, do we agree that the pattern is of the Jewish feast or Jewish wedding? I'd say yes, absolutely.
So two things. First and foremost, I never noticed this until now. When you're really thinking hard, your eyes are going to shut every time.
Yeah.
So just to let you know, you do the same thing that my extra doctor used to do, which would look at me, shut his eyes, and not say anything. The second thing is MH 1953 had made the comment, will we be in heaven, before the second coming? You and I differ greatly on this. This is probably the one time that you and I do not agree. And the bottom line to remember on this is there is enough evidence in the Bible to suggest both are possible.
Right.
And that's where we differ. So for me, my hope, my wish, my prayer is that my belief is, yes, we will not be here. We will be taken up in rapture pre-trib, which we've always talked about, and not pre-tribble, not a Star Trek joke.
Right.
But pre-tribulation, we will be there. And certainly for my kids' sakes, my loved ones' sakes, for believers in Christ, that is what I feel. More and more, I am beginning to lean towards your methodology of belief, which is maybe we're even here for the whole thing. I don't know. Jason, you've probably said your take many times on the show, but once more for the crowd at home.
Well, so I do want to say I am pre-tribble. I do not believe that we will be here for the tribbles. So that is absolutely the case. I think we absolutely agree on that, Raymond. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Dang it, Paco. I'm sorry. That's my bad.
Strike one, McLean.
Strike one. Anyway, so my thought, here's the thing. I agree that the rapture event, which is I believe to be the revelation or the resurrection as well, that we see in the seventh trumpet, and the actual coming, Jesus on the horse, those are two separate events. They're interconnected events, though. I would argue that the seventh trumpet is the resurrection and rapture of the living church, and then it is the outpouring of God's wrath in the seven vials. Then we come back with Jesus on the white horse, where his entourage, and that's the Battle of Armageddon.
I can honestly tell you, I don't think I want to be referred to as the Jesus entourage. I'm fairly certain, my friend. That doesn't sound. Jesus can get gangsta, but I don't believe he is gangsta.
Well, hold on. Let's be honest. He's coming through. People are getting tied up in chains. He's blowing people up with giant blocks of ice. It doesn't get more gangsta than that. Let's be honest. But J-Dog, man, he rolls hard. He rolls hard. That being said, no, well, entourage does not necessarily mean just rappers and gangsters. Entourage is an old word. We will be coming with him, right? But he's the one doing all. We're just there basically being like, ooh, we're not really doing stuff. A lot of people think we're going to be doing stuff. I think we're just going to be like, wow, I'm really glad I'm on this side of the fence, right? Like, I mean, that's.
So bottom line is you are definitely mid and post tribble.
I'm pre-tribble, but I'm pre-wrath. Which again, I think one of the vials you could argue they may be tribbles. Just saying. I put all of the vials at the very, very end. I think there's that week between, that's me. Now again, I may be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll owe you a Coke or whatever heaven considers Coke to be, which is probably the original formula. But maybe cherry.
You can't see this right now. I'm shaking my head and hoping that you're going on.
I know.
Okay. No.
I assure you, I'm aware. So yeah. No, I'm like I said, I'm towards the end of the week, but pre-wrath and pre. So yeah, you know what? # pre-tribble. That's me. So to Image 1953's second question, yes, I do think we will be in heaven prior to his coming. The question is it a week or is it 7 years? I tend to say between the sixth seal and the imagery about the trumpet that we see all throughout the New Testament, the fact that Jesus fulfilled the first 4 feasts, right, his first coming in succession, and in the language that we find the 7th trumpet, I think it's at the end. But that's just me. By the way, Mr. D. Knuckles sent me a great question. In fact, it was so great, I'm going to make an entire episode out of it. It won't be this Sunday. It'll be next Sunday. Tomorrow is going to be about Trump and politics in general. So lots of light stuff. It's going to be sort of gimme.
Yeah, guess which episode I won't be on.
Uh-huh. Oh, I know.
And that's not because of who was just mentioned. It's because I just don't like politics. And I think,
okay, so actually, here's the thing. You may actually like this one. I will say this, because I don't think you'll probably know what I'm going to say, but I think it may surprise you a little bit.
Well, it's not even that. I had a discussion with another pastor this week. Small discussion. It wasn't anything big, and but when I was talking about it, I had made mention that part of the problem that I think we have with politics and religion is that the outside influence of what we see currently of checking your emotion at the door, number one, using logic to have a open-minded discussion in reference to another person's opinion has no place in society anymore. And number 3, we are very quick to have things said in the name of our God. And when it comes to other religions, it's whatever they deem as their God to be. It's not to sit there and say that I'm agreeing with those other religions by any stretch of the imagination, but that seems to be the problem. We somehow, and I say somehow, it's not even a question. We did. We let that trickle into the church and the church body. And absolutely. Now, when I hear about politics, where in my youth I could talk about it freely without fear of offending, triggering, violent repercussions that we see nowadays, I can no longer do that. So I'd rather just stay out of it. So if we could somehow find a way to get back to understanding everybody and respecting their opinions, not agreeing with them. We're not saying that, right? It goes into the same field as everything else, right? You don't have to agree with another human being's perspective to not show them respect. You can do both. You can respect the other person's opinion, not agree with it, and then a third thing, you can absolutely show humanity to that other person, even though they may be doing something. Look, cast the first stone. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Cast the first stone. We lost our way. We really did.
No, we did. In fact, that's really what all of last week's. By the way, if y'all haven't seen the addendum I did last Sunday, go see that. It absolutely it fixes. I did take it. I overstepped in one thing, but it corrected it so that we're all in the same. So it's easy to go extreme, or to see something and then take one step further. So like Adam and Eve, right? Eve was like, we can't even touch the tree, and that's where Satan was able to get in. We have to stick to what the Spirit is saying. However, just to your point, I completely agree. I think one of the big problems we have is, I think we allowed. This is just a little bit about what we'll be talking about tomorrow, but last week was all about allowing the spirits of the age, right, to come in. And we've intertwined Christianity into politics too much. It doesn't mean that as Christians we're not supposed to be participants within politics, but rather the way this country was even set up was the politics was supposed to stay out of the church, but the church was supposed to have the influence into the politics. I mean, we were saying what was right, what was moral, and we called it out. But what's happened is it worked the other way. We started looking for leaders. We started looking for people to lead us instead of saying, hey, no, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. And the politics crept into the church. So we've, in many ways, we've been served, we've oftentimes replaced God with with country, and that's not the way it should be. So, like I said, tomorrow's will be fun. But then the week after, we will talk about Mr. D. Nichols' question, because it was a really good question, and the problem is it's a thing unto itself.
So let me ask this question, right? For on behalf of Mr. D. Knuckle there, what was the question, so we can ponder this for a little bit? You can have your show on it. I'm just curious.
Right? Yeah. No. Okay. So he was focusing on. It was less of a question, more just sort of a presentation of the differing thoughts of eschatology have come from, whether preterist, pre-trib, amillennial, sort of the history of these things, where they came from. And I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but what really made me think is, there is an argument out there, and this is why I want to do the whole show. There is an argument that that any view of eschatology is inherently flawed, because the original church didn't have it. They were waiting for something to happen right then and there, and that this idea of the millennial reign of Jesus, or an end time scenario, when it would occur, all these things are newer adaptations, and some even things like that, or even sort of some were even counter to the Protestants. And sort of where these thoughts came from, what agenda did they have. So there's a lot there to unpack, which is why I really want to go through it on a whole show. It's an interesting concept, but the thing is, there's a lot of material we often don't look at in the church, as far as history of the church, where things come from. And that's why I want to take a whole episode to talk about it, or a broadcast, whatever we want to call these things. I still don't have a good word for this. Are these episodes? Are they broadcasts? Are they meetings? I don't know.
They're tribbles.
They're tribbles. Okay, so then I'm no longer PreTribble. Dang it! See, that's why we have these nights. I'm changing my mind. I'm no longer PreTribble. But yeah, so that's what it was about. Sort of the origin of eschatology, of Christian eschatology. Where does it come from? Who had what agendas tied into them? Those kinds of things. But we're going to talk about the Didache. We're going to talk about Jewish eschatology. There's a lot to talk about there. So actually, let me lead off with now that we sort of addressed that first sort of question. Let me start off with a question I have, right? So yes, I am a young Earth creationist. When we get done with Revelation, we're jumping to Genesis. I love Genesis. Love ANX Gamecast. You're the only one who's going to get that joke. So anyway, it's so yeah, young Earth creationist, but I can be flexible as far as what does young Earth mean, right? All that being said, I do believe there was a worldwide flood. I believe fossilization is a byproduct of that event. But I look at Australia, look at South America. And in South America, we've got, sloths. And we have their, 1953. That's a good one. I'll come to that in a second. We have sloths in the fossil record in South America. And then we have sloths there. Australia. We have these massive wombats. They're the size of a VW wagon, right? Like the big, like those vans that the hippies used to drive around in, and the Ninja Turtles adapted. Right. So we have giant kangaroos, wombats, and koalas in the fossil record in Australia, and that's where they are. So if the flood occurred the way I traditionally think it happened, why do we have wombats and kangaroos and koalas only in Australia? Why do we have sloths only in South America? How did they get there so quickly? So, like I said, I mean, that's a legitimate question I have, and it's one that I haven't really come to an answer to. I don't know that I have a solution that works from a biblical perspective, or even just a functional position. If everything was wiped out, I mean, are we suggesting angels came and was like, nope, we need to put y'all way over here? So I don't have a question. Again, that's my question: is how did they get there?
There were bad tenants on the ark, and Noah kicked them off wherever he was at, and that's how they got stuck.
It's like, I hope y'all float. Well, the koalas are picky eaters, right?
Well, no, the koalas jumped onto the sloths, and that's how that happened. Sloths were so still, they just kind of floated along until they hit dry land as well. Koala was on top of the sloth.
And the koala's like, all right.
Don't get me started on the platypus.
So, yeah. No, exactly. Oh, platypi.
So, I'm sorry. Did she say 10-foot wingspans, MH 1953?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. No. No.
Those are fruit bats. The ones that have like the
those aren't fruit bats. Those are Draculas. Like you saw Dracula. You stake to the heart and crosses, because no on a 10-foot wingspan.
They are adorable, and you know it.
No, they're not.
So again, that's my question. Like I mean, that's a big question I have, and it has some rather profound ramifications. And sort of tied into that question is, when God made the earth, right, in the universe, we know that Adam was made with a parent age, right? I mean, whatever age he was, he certainly wasn't an infant or a fetus. He was a full-grown adult, right? Same thing when Jesus created water and made water into wine. Wine takes time. For it to be really good wine, it needs to be aged, right? So it's a profound amount of age. So God could create time, things with a sense of age. How do we know the universe wasn't made that way? Like, what if the evidence that that scientists point to for evolution is simply because that's how it's like? God's like, well, this is how life would happen. So that's a story sort of built into it, right? Like, how much of what we're seeing is simply backstory that was created? I tend to think the dinosaurs were alive with man because we've got dinosaurs running around today. We've got pterodactyls running around today. That's a conversation I think we've had more than once. So, right? Just saying. I mean, I've got some. Those are my questions. Like, I mean, they're not necessarily textual questions, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, either of them. So that's where I'm at. That's my question. Do you have any thoughts, Paco? Or are you still caught up on the 10-foot wingspan?
I'm still scared about a 10-foot wingspan and the fact that, quote unquote, they are harmless. I don't think so. And when they landed in a tree, the whole tree swayed. That's problematic. That's what I'm thinking. You know how I feel about this, man. I have belief and room in my head to think that there was, part of it that. How do we not know that these were the creatures that were talked about in Genesis when the earth was dark, and what we'll call soulless? What makes that determination? There's, you and I will argue the point all the time. How old the earth is.
Yeah.
When did everything happen? Like, that is always an argument that we get into. I say argument, more of a discussion.
Yep.
But I see both sides. Like, I really do. I part of me does have that logic and that scientific look into things. But I think that sometimes those of us with faith-based theologies only tend to, go. I don't want to say strictly by the Bible, because everyone should be strictly by the Bible, but I think there's got to be some interpretation, and we know there's interpretation into the Bible, because how else can we have 15 quote unquote messages on the same passage within the Bible, right? That's kind of the whole point. It's there to guide us. So I can see it both ways. We've had this talk, like, there's certain people in heaven, like, we're going to be like, huh? Like, really? Okay. And then there are certain people that we're going to be like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, oh, so you're in the other place. Cool. And I think that's the same thing. I think it's going to be a lot of that. So for me personally, I don't 100% agree with you. We've talked about it, and that's just where I'm at with it.
Which is fine. I do think that one of the mistakes we have made is that we ignore the obvious mythological language that's often used throughout the Old Testament, and we often forget that it's more. We look at it the same way we would read someone writing a newspaper today, and we sort of forget that there's a theological point to it. We don't necessarily know that, like, those names may not be the names they actually used. They're just the names given. And if we look at them, oftentimes these names have theological implications, right? In fact, that's one of the things we will do when we get to Genesis is look at the message created by the names of the early patriarchs. Like, there is a message sort of encoded in those genealogies. So it's it is. I do think that we need to have a lot more grace on that. If someone's like, well, hey, maybe God did use millions of years. I get it. It's not where I'm at, but at the same time, I got questions I can't really answer. So it's one of the things.
But that's okay to have, though, right? Like, I mean, doesn't that...
Is it though? Is it though?
Yeah, because look, one person had all the answers, and no one on this particular podcast, audience, or anyone outside that's not listening to this, which is the rest of the world, you're not it. We're not perfect. So I think it's okay to have these questions. I think it's okay to not look for the answers that may not be there on purpose. Right?
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's a valuable point. MH1953, we're going to get into that a lot more. Again, when we get to Genesis, but and that is an argument that's been made, is that it became void. I know what you're going. That is actually very much a newer interpretation of that word. It's tahu v'ba, or void is tahu, but it says became. It is. That's very much a new argument. It's okay. We're going to get into this. So again, I talked a lot about this in the flat cosmology video, not the flat Earth, right? Where we have to remember that it's again, Godzilla was able to hang in there and help me prove that. But the waters. So again, So the way the ancients viewed the cosmology is that there is water beneath, like it is the abyss. It just goes on forever. The land is on top of that. I do think that, again, we need to focus on the fact that there's mythological language used in Genesis, and it's describing it from their point of view of this flat cosmology. When we say the Earth, we mean one rock surrounding, spinning around one sun in one solar system in one galaxy in our universe, right? That's
far away.
Far, far away. That is not how the ancients viewed the world. The ancients saw the Earth as meaning the world, or all of material creation. Meaning, if you could poke it with a stick, if you could smell it, or as Paco likes to do, lick random objects, then it was material and it was of the world. The spirits, the Elohim, those are of the non-material world, or the supernatural world. So their cosmology was very, very different. I actually do think that when it talks about the waters, I am of the opinion that what's happening there is that there is, when you get into when you start looking at quantum reality, there's this idea of just energy, right? That energy is just there. There's languages from the Dogons, who are in Africa. They seem to have a connection to the not the Pharisees. Pharaoh's what I was saying, but that's not it. But Pharaoh's court, the priests of Egypt, right? And they have this interesting connection where they will tell you, hey, some of these were, yes, doorknob licking.
It's a habit. Sorry.
Yeah. We've tried
okay.
gum. We've tried electrical.
It's okay though, because what I do is I make sure that the hand gel sanitizer, I just take a few shots there on my tongue, and all the bacteria is gone again.
Yeah, because that's also healthy. So yeah, I mean, so again, we're going to talk a lot more about that. But the thing is, it's not. Unfortunately, the problem is we try to take metaphor or mythological and metaphorical language literally, and I think what's happening here is the argument between, say, a scientist who can say how a child is formed in the womb and in the process by which the child goes from not existing to existing, and a child saying, God made my baby brother, right? the problem is, I think we're trying to have this argument, and they're like, no, these are two different points that are being made. So again, we'll talk way more about that. But again, yes, to Paco's point, aside from licking doorknobs, yes, I do think that we need to have a lot of flexibility as far as, whether or not we're going to be like, hey, you're a heretic for believing God could use evolution, which he can. That's his choice. It's our interpretation that matters. It's what actually happened. So was it an instant creation like I think? But if it was instant creation and there's evidence of deep
Evolution.
time, right, because that's what would have taken to get there, then is it the same? Then basically it's sort of like, well, is it 6 one way, half dozen the other? Again, I go back to the wine, right? Jesus made some kicking wine when he was at that party. So, which indicates deep time. So I think if we were to measure that wine, if we could take a sample of it, there would be nothing to indicate that it wasn't brand new, right? It would look like it had been around for 100 years or so, maybe even older. So again, I think it's one of those things where this may be 6 one way, half dozen the other. How do sure, it's only 6,000 years old, but it was made old. So what do we do with that, right? So there's a lot of conversation to have. I just go back to, how did the koalas get onto Australia? Like that's a problem. Like, how did we get there? And I don't have an answer for that. I want to go back to, because it was rather quick, MH1953 had a really great question, and this very much ties into what Dr. Reed was talking about a couple weeks back, when it says God searches our hearts and kidneys in the Old Testament. Dr. Reed actually talked about this.
I gotta be honest, I saw OT and I thought, there was overtime in the Old Testament? Like, how did that work out? Like, did first person score, or like who won that? Who won that match?
Exactly. It's like, whoa, what? There's more books to this Bible. Flip, 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 flip. It's like we get to Revelation, and then we get to overtime. Like, oh man, I thought we were done. No. Again, this goes back to the idea of in the Canaanite world, they believe that the intestines and the guts were the seat of emotions, right? Like when you really have those, when you have all those nice squishy feelings for somebody, what happens? It feels like you feel those, we even call them, butterflies in your stomach, right? So a lot of our emotions are sort of experienced in our digestive area. So for them,
I do love me some food.
You do love you some food. We all love us some food. I love us some food, free enough for the two of us. And I'm still going to win that bet with text. But that being said, so yeah, a lot of that is about. So that's where the seat of emotions were. And for us, like we talk about our heart, right? We know our love doesn't live in our heart; it's in our brain. This is where all the thinky parts happen, right? But it's the same way for them. The kidneys were the seat of emotion. The kidney, when it talks about, I will bless the Lord with my reins. Well, what the heck does that mean? It means his kidneys, and that's where love reside, right? That was sort of their way of saying heart, right? Same concept. So yeah. So back again, Old Testament, they thought that that's where the guts were, because remember, this was the same culture that had no idea what the brain did, right? Egyptian, we can't separate.
It's the same culture now.
Ooh, yeah. Now let's be honest. No one uses the brain anymore, except for me and Paco and MH1953 and Lethia. Mr. D Knuckle, I'm looking at you. Anyway, no. Yeah. So when you see weird expressions like that, it's because essentially it was their view of the world, right? It was just that's how they viewed the world. They viewed their intestines as the seat of emotions, and so you get these phrases that to us look very, very weird. But it goes back to the question of translation, right? There is no, like we said with Dr. Reed, there's no such thing as translation. There's only interpretation, because it's about the conveyance of meaning from one language and one culture to a completely different language and a completely different culture. So sometimes things can't, which goes back to why I was talking about the issue I had with the Hallelujah Bible when they were saying, well, it's the most literal. I'm like, well, if it's the most literal, then we're not going to understand anything, like at all, because our language doesn't work the way ancient Hebrew did. So Yeah, that's where that came from. Paco, do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions?
Yeah, about tribbles specifically.
I have tons of questions, and we've gotten into them before.
Yeah.
With there's one that I was thinking about asking you. I'm not going to ask that today, just because I don't feel that it's relevant to the path that we've taken.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
you're talking about other stuff tomorrow, obviously, that I don't really, want to get into either. I thought when I sorry, MH1953, that was a great comment. I thought when I was a new Christian, he was checking for alcohol levels. He might, and I gotta tell you, if that's the case, I'm also, I'm gonna be a little bit in trouble to this day, because that is a favorite pastime of mine. Not to the point to where, in my youth, I was doing stupid stuff, but certainly, still for the occasion. And Jason's shaking his head because he got to see some of it. Again, youth being our youth, and now, Jason, let me age you up a little bit, but we're talking 20 years ago now.
I don't know. I think that one time at the pizza festival downtown, that wasn't that
was
long ago.
that was fairly recent.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that was a fun time. That was a frustrating time. I can honestly tell you, I cannot say that mine are clean, but
But you know what? You know what? You could pass the sobriety test. Like
I
when you
sure
get
could.
there,
I sure
and Peter's like, click, look into the light. Can you walk the line for me, please? Like, you'll pass that. We're fine.
Yeah.
Don't drink in Rapture. That's all I'm saying.
Susan, if you're falling asleep, we're sorry that we are boring you. So, but we get it. Go and rest.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a couple of things from Peter that I probably adhere a little too close to from time to time.
Peter's writings read it as a little
too bit too explicit sometimes.
Too familiar. You're like,
yeah,
oh,
for sure.
Sounds like Tuesday. All right,
for sure. But no, I mean, like, the question that I have, I think a lot for you is going to be the following, which is, why do you believe that it is not that way for when we're talking about a pre-tribulation, post-tribulation, mid-tribulation? I don't think you've explained that to necessarily anyone in detail when we talk about things of the Bible that we believe. You and I have had this conversation, but I don't see why you think that that's the case, that we won't be taken pre. And I know I'm going back to a conversation earlier, but I've never understood. So let's take it from that point. Why do you think? Because that's something you've never elaborated on.
Okay, no, that's a very valid question. I think it's a great point. So let me start off by saying I was raised pre-trib, right? That's my background. I was raised pre-trib, and I was pre-trib very much up until the last, I don't know. I'm really trying to think about when I stopped. It's been within the last 20 years. Oh my gosh, I just realized what I said. Probably within the last close to 17.
Thanks for narrowing that down there, Skippy.
Yeah, I know. Well, hold on. When did we work for Commerce? That was
90. I'm sorry, 90. Jeez. 2001 through 2005.
Yeah, 2005 was when you left, right? Mm-hmm. And then I was gone like 6-7 months later when they basically just folded. It was down to just me and Melanie.
Yeah, man, you'd love to name drop, dude. We got to talk to you about keeping identities where they're at.
No one's going to be able to run into this. Please calm yourself. Take another shot. You'll be fine.
You're hysterical, man. Hysterical.
No. So it was. So yeah, it's been within the last. It's 2020 now. So yeah, last 15, 14 years.
I'd say get to the point, but you're really delaying it.
Well, there's a point here. What happened was I started noticing problems with people. Like I started noticing there was no one verse that you could go to. Like, don't get me wrong. There are lots of things that we believe, like the Trinity, right? There's no one verse you go to. It's like, bam, this is Jesus saying I'm that God is a Trinitarian God. Like, that's not happened. But you can show the verses. It's like, here is where this is very clearly laid out. In fact, I was listening to an argument Michael Heiser had, and he even pointed out, he's like, if we were to say God is a triune God, and here's the evidence for it, like, Paul would probably look at it and say, I never thought of it that way, but that's exactly what I was trying to say, right? It's so this idea that as the Christian religion has grown, we've had a chance to work these things out. And that is something that we need to remember, is that we are sort of learning. We're trying to discover these things. But I look at the rapture and I'm like, that seems like an awful lot of supposition. And it's like, well, because of this and this and this and this, but none of them were like, driving home. I started listening to End Times Ministries. I just forgot his name. He's actually here. He's local to us. Irvin Baxter. And he started having some interesting points about the trumpets, right? And he's like, hey, there's some good evidence that some of these trumpets have blown. And while I'm not 100% with him, on board with him, he's got a solid argument for some of these things. But it really started getting me thinking about it, right? And I was like, well, hold on. Let's really work this out. And so I started looking, I'm like, well, what is the verses? And this is the thing that really got me. I was like, so where does the rapture come from? Like, where's the verse where, like, this is where we get the idea of the rapture? And I started looking at it, and it occurred to me, it was just so much of what Paul was saying in 1 Thessalonians is lining up with Matthew 24, right? I mean, straight up as it just looked like all Paul was saying was, hey, y'all remember what happened, Matthew 24. I'm just going to give you a little extra more insight in the fact that those who are alive will also be transformed. And I started weighing that against what we see about Paul in the book of Acts and his other writings. He is always quoting from we see a lot of. Sorry, I'm also reading the quotes. I should probably stop doing that. It's throwing me off because I'm like, I want to agree with Dino.
I do have some points on that too with Catholicism as a whole, but let's finish up the.
Yeah, we'll finish this. So what happened was I started asking myself the question of, well, what is the pre-tribulational rapture based on? And so I just kept looking at the verse in 1 Thessalonians. I asked, why would I assume that Paul, who throughout the entire book of Acts is quoting the Old Testament or quoting something from Greek sources, which is what a rabbi would do, right? That's how the Jewish rabbis are taught. You appeal to authority. Paul is always quoting from the Old Testament, particularly in his writings. And it's sort of this way with things like the Book of Enoch. We see him quoting, basically alluding to passages from the Book of Enoch, from what we call the Apocrypha. It's like he's always sort of going to something new or something old to make a new point. And so I looked at 1 Thessalonians. I'm like, wouldn't it make more sense that in 1 Thessalonians, when he's talking about this verse, it gives us the rapture, he's simply referring back to Matthew 24 because he's using even the same language. There's a one-to-one parallel there. Like he's not quoting it verbatim, he's paraphrasing. And then the mystery that he's talking about is the translation of the living Christian being raptured, into a glorified body. I'm like, that makes more sense than anything. That all Paul is doing is saying, hey, y'all already heard about this because you already have the book of Matthew, which I believe I don't believe in the Q document. I believe that Matthew was the first gospel, and I think it is the Q document. I don't agree with the Q hypothesis. So for me, that's what got me to say, okay, I don't really see any evidence for a pre-tribulational rapture, and it just seemed like there was so much to make that point. There was so much built around it. I'm like, it's just it just works out easier if it's just okay. Well, it's at the end before the wrath of God.
But let me stop you there, though.
It's easier. Yeah.
Let me stop you there, though, because you're saying that.
Yeah.
But I can flip that around and say there's no evidence to support what you're saying either. Not any hard evidence anyway, right? Okay. And I think that's why we have the trouble that we do as a church, where we say there's pre, mid, and post, because there isn't enough evidence one way or the other. And I feel personally, I feel God did that on purpose. It was like,
Well, yeah,
you
so
always
I
need to be
agree.
you always need to be on your toes, because again, like we've always talked about, and I commented on one of your other shows,
Mhm.
the rapture will come for you the moment that life has decided to stop existing for you at that moment. And guess what, people? The rapture happens every day for all of us around this world. You're going to get raptured at some point in your life. If we're talking about the main rapture, um, then continue to believe what you need to believe to help you with that. But the bottom line is, and what it was always meant to be, the rapture could come at any time and moment for you. That was what I took from it, and
Mhm.
that's what I always have taken from it. So, when we talk specifically about this, do I hope for pre? Yes, because I really don't want. I'm living through what we live through now, and I'm already tired of it. And I never thought I'd reach an age where I'm just like, man, now would be a good day, God.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is it could be that day for you.
Yes.
So always have your heart right where
Mhm.
it needs to be. Going into Catholicism real quick,
Mhm.
it is hard when you have a family that is very prime into the Catholic Church. Um,
Wait, Paco, are you suggesting that Catholicism may be big amongst people in a particular racial group? Is that what you're indicating?
I am saying that I'm 1/16 before anyone starts talking. But I know how it was with my family. Now, what I will say, and there are still some very hardcore uh, Roman Catholicism focused individuals out there in this world. But as
Mhm.
we see with a lot of the local churches from Catholicism, they are starting to take a very Christian view um,
Yes.
to what's going on. I am starting to notice and see them backing off as to one of it was let's ask St. Anthony for prayers, or let's pray to the Virgin Mary, or let's do this. We're starting to see a shift in how they're looking, and I feel it's because of the main church for the Catholics, that they're starting to disagree with what they are allowing to
Yeah.
start coming through, and they're starting to make that they're starting to really discern between what has been, what is, and what is coming, and you're starting to see that transition. So there are always going to be people who still
Mhm.
very much, and I can tell you right now, a lot of my family down south was the same way.
Mhm.
Cannot believe you're doing Christian, and that's not the way the Catholics do it, and you can go in there, but there's as I got older, my whole thing was this: why am I going through middlemen to get to God? Like that
Yeah.
was my personal take. Why do I have to go through the middleman to get to God? That's not what God preached in his book. And a lot of churches that are Catholic, and I'm not saying all of them, I'm saying a lot of them, you're
Yeah.
not going to read the Bible. They're not going to allow you to read the Bible. That
Mhm.
Bible is for that pastor. That relationship with God is between that uh, priest and the priest alone, and to God alone. And no, that's not how it was written, and that's not what it was. You should be able to go pray directly to God. Good Lord, I wish I could do the same thing with a car. I don't want to go through the middleman for the car.
Yep.
Um, but it is very much, you see the problems that the Catholics had with, their, I can't say recent anymore. I'm going to say ongoing
Yeah.
problems within the diocese. It saddens me. We know we have a friend who he always will refer to himself as a recovering Catholic.
Yes.
Um, it's hard. It's very hard. Like uh,
Yep.
you don't want to see any. It's not about religion. And Catholicism at its core was very much about the religious beliefs that were set
Yeah.
forth in that church. Everyone needs to understand at this point in time, it is your relationship between you and God. When people ask me, I almost get a little bit paranoid when people go, "What religion are you?" And the first thing I always say is, I'm not religion. I do not go to a religion. It is not that. I have a belief in the Bible, and I have my
Yeah.
relationship with God as it was intended to be. When you go to a church, it's for the comfort of like-minded people and individuals who are not there to take advantage of you, who are not there to belittle you, who are not there to make you feel any worse than you may already be, but is to comfort, provide support, and be with like-minded people. And if you start to forget that place of where you're at, you get dangerously close to a more religious experience as opposed to a spiritual experience that you should be having.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, and in fact, that's very much, again, I'm a long time ago. We've had this conversation
Yeah.
before. I'm like, can I just be a Christian? Like, what point? There are things I do think points of theology that are important in maybe schools of thought, but it's like, shouldn't we just be Christians first? And let me say, this is where a lot of people are like, really? I don't believe that Catholics aren't Christian. But let me refine that a little bit. I think that Catholics can be Christian the same way I think a Methodist or a non-denominational or anyone can. It's about your relationship with Jesus. End of story. Jesus never asked us to get everything right. Right? It's about faith. It's about putting your faith in him. It's about becoming a part of his kingdom. That's it. In fact, I find it very interesting whenever because I've heard in my life, from the denomination I came out of, people say, have you come to a saving knowledge of Jesus? And I'm like, that seems awfully Gnostic of you to say, right? That doesn't seem like what we're supposed to be fighting for.
And he was like 12 when he said that comment, by the way. That's how much vocabulary Jason's had instilled in him. Go ahead. Sorry, man.
No, that's fine. You're not wrong. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing is there's all of these denominations are inherently based on a religious viewpoint, and then creating and imposing that religious viewpoint, like King James only. Like, that's, as much as I'm like, look, Catholicism is weird, and I it's just not my thing. And I'm like, look, I don't like the fact that there's a middleman between me and God. At the same time, I'll look at KJV only churches, and I'm like, you realize they didn't speak English 2,000 years ago, right? Yeah. I've actually heard people say, well, look, if the King James Bible was good enough for Paul, it's good enough for me.
You don't understand the language it was written in for Paul. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. And again, it's like, unless you're using 1611, don't tell me you're King James only. Yeah. Right? If you're using anything published in the last 200 years, you're not King James only. So stop it.
Yeah. And I think that's the point that we need to stress too, right? Whenever a church, let me rephrase this, whenever the body of the church starts to allow religion, allow politics, both internal and external, because a lot can be said for internal.
Oh yeah.
And allow a thinking and a process where it becomes more about the church body or the religious experience than your relationship with God. You need to think about that. You need to stop what you're doing, and you need to ask yourself, do I need to be here? Because look, just like there are great things in churches all around the world, there are bad things in churches all around the world too. And unfortunately, people will take advantage of other people no matter the setting that they are in. And it's up to us, it's up to yourself to watch out for it and to help protect others from it within the same aspect of still having respect for one another. It is hard, it is difficult, but it can be done.
It is. And that's the hard work that we were all called to do, right? As Christians. I think that's one of those things that we don't really fully appreciate all the time is, hey, he called us to a relationship, and that does mean hard work, right? I mean, thinking about your husband, your wife, or a good friend, that takes work to be and have that kind of relationship. Some friends take more work than others. But anyway,
I see what you did. I see what you did there, Dirk. No, it is though. Yeah. And to put this also in perspective, every single one of us, look, guys, we're always going to be quote unquote recovering from something, and the vast majority of us are recovering from sin. But what I hope that everyone takes away is one, when people talk about, uh, getting over your sin or, working with that path with God, it's not going to be perfect. You're not perfect. We were not meant, are imperfect creatures from the word go almost. The moment that we decided to nom on some fruit tree in the middle of a luscious green pasture, we all had the ability, um, to be in that sinful nature, and we're always carrying that with us until it is time. We're always going to be battling that. So I think it's important that we do understand it. We try not to repeat it, but we also don't think that that is our pathway to hell automatically because,
Yeah.
oh man, I took that one sip, or that's what forgiveness is for. If we were perfect, Jesus would have never died on the cross for us. Bottom
Oh,
line.
exactly. If we could do it ourselves, there would have never
Yeah.
been a reason for him. And I think this is something it's easy for, and this is where I think for me, where I start like, okay, hold on. Does this thought pattern take me closer to the Pharisees or closer to Jesus? Right. The second I look at somebody, I'm like,
Sorry, go ahead, man.
anyway, the second, the question I have is that I always ask myself is like, well, hold on. Am I showing this person the same grace I would want shown to me? And the simple fact of the matter is if you we find it very easy to forgive ourselves, we find it very hard to forgive others sometimes.
Yep.
And it's like, well, what did Jesus actually ask? Like, just there's no reason to make it harder. It's like it isn't like Jesus said, okay, like again, the Romans wrote, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and that Jesus was the Christ. Like, that's all you have to do. But then we have all these other things. It's like, well, but then you also have to believe this, and you have to know this, and you have to know this, and you have to do this. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's pharisaical. It's only what does the text actually say? Because Jesus was always pointing to Moses, right? He's like, what did Moses actually say? And and the entire point is he was pointing back to the actual law. It's like, God only asked you to do this. Y'all all decided you need to do these things. Well, y'all weren't Moses. You weren't there at Sinai. Shove off, right? And that's the problem. We keep wanting to throw these things onto what God actually said, and we keep we make it harder and harder because we want people to prove that they're saved. And it's like, that's not what He asked us to do. And that's hard enough. What Jesus actually asked us to do is hard enough on its own. I don't think we need to make it any harder.
And in Lethea, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. One of the things when you are trying to bring someone closer to God, I think that everyone should realize is you can lead, but you cannot force. So you hope to keep that continuous thought. But I can tell you, for me, when I, and granted, not an excuse at all, but I know when I started to wane on my faith, and there was a lot of things going on at the time. But Jason, what do you think? It was about 2-3 years where I just really, I was, man, you want to talk about being angry with God? I was there. But the one thing I can tell you though is no one could get me out of that but me. And it's prayers of others, just praying, not to have that person see what you see, but to see what they need to see to get through that next level. Once I was ready, I sought and seeked again, not just faith, but that relationship with it, with God, because I never was in a spot where I had a true relationship with God until I was coming out of the backside of my dilemmas and my issues and my problems. And then everything that came before, I realized, was just me doing protocol, if you will. And that's not what you want. You need for that person's eyes to be open, but you definitely, I can tell you right now, forcing the other individual or doing anything like that. I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying anyone would on this, on our comment section. But the moment that you start to force, the moment you're going to start pushing away. And I think that's what we're also seeing in the church today. I think we're trying to see people that are forcing this issue, and that also can lead to the exact opposite of what we want.
No, I completely agree. I think it's, in fact, I'm going to go back a little bit to, I think it was I think Mr. D. Nichols actually said it. He asked, if you thought maybe it was that people were being called out of Catholicism, right? I think right now, more than anything, what I see is that we're all being. Oh, there we are. Sorry, internet's being a little flaky over here. But I think we're all being called out, right? We're all coming out of this this time and out of these sort of false constraints, and I think that's why we're seeing a rise in things like this, right? People coming together, and we're talking about this on our own. We're sort of eschewing the system because we realize the system's failed us, and this has been going on for a while, but I think it's really kicking into high gear. And I think that everything, with COVID and 2020 is sucktacular as 2020 has been, in many ways, it's been used to awaken a lot of things. So I think we're all being called out. It's not just, it's easy to look at Catholicism from the Protestant viewpoint and say, look at how bad they are. But I'm over here to tell you, guys, I think we're all coming out of the false beliefs, out of these false systems, these false religious requirements, right? I think we're all doing it because God's calling us to that higher standard. I personally believe we got 1 billion souls left to save over the next 10 years or so. And I think that we all have to be in the fields doing our things. As I've said many times, doers of Christianity, not hearers. So that's my thought. That's all I got to say about that.
Jenny, I love you. Any questions you got for me, Scooby, as we're coming up on our towards the end here?
Yeah, we're already an hour into this. I'm trying to think. Do I have any questions? Like I said, I think really the main question I had was that one. Although, yeah, okay. So here's one. This is sort of a one I wrestle with as an artist, right? So we're told not to make graven images, and I've always thought that was very specifically about items of worship, right? That's what they're talking about. And I've been in fairly good company. But there are times, where people are like, maybe he means all art. So here's where things get fuzzy. I'm of the opinion he just meant items for worship, right? So like an icon.
Sorry, Jason, I'm laughing because I just saw "Pray with Me," Forrest. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, so my question is always, is there the line where it gets fuzzy is if it's not about creating, definitely not creating an icon, but artwork is fine. But what about any artwork that would depict something like, say, Jesus or God? Like, it's not meant to be an item of worship, but does it violate that as well? Does it? Because I've often wondered how, people, when they conceive of what God looks like, they conceive of God in their head, they think back to Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel and sort of this angry dude with a white beard going, right? And like, that's their conception of God. And that's a very limiting thought. So my question maybe to you and to anyone else out there who may, this is just an open conversation. Like, does that mean that we need that when we're like, if we're illustrating a story, should Jesus not be shown? Should God not be shown something? Or should we have some sort of metaphorical representation of them? Because does that violate the commandment about creating graven images?
Depends on which truly religious sect you're gonna go with. I know you know what I'm saying. And if that's the case, then yes, you're putting idolatry behind the image. I know what you're doing, and I've seen your artwork, and the short answer is no, because you have not put God into a picture so much that your belief is that God resides in that image. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. I get it.
So the short answer very much is no. But certainly we know of religions that would say otherwise to that. And hey, God bless them, right? Like, I still love them like your brother. I know plenty of people that are within those other religions that I do know, that I do consider good acquaintances. Something that we've discussed, something that we've talked about, and we've come to that point of agreeing to disagree.
And why can't we do that more often? Why can't it be? Look, I can love someone and not fully agree with them. Can't we just can't we all get along?
Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah.
The individual's smart. People are dumb, panicky animals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think we're good, man.
All right. Well, this was a wonderful time. I think we should probably do this a little more often. At least maybe once a month or so. Just hang out, throw questions around, topics. Tomorrow, like I said, it's going to get a little serious tomorrow, but I think it's going to be really good. I think there's going to be some surprising things that I say. And MH1953, yes. Evil Eye has my hands. Yeah, let's not. Yeah, those are pretty obvious. It's like pentagrams, things like that.
Maybe stay away from from those types of images. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, unfortunately, Disney did not get that notice. Wait, just okay, completely off topic, but right. Dang it, Paco, love you. You did see that thing about where Disney now has a show about where there's an actual devil that is based off of I just forgot his name. The one with the horns, Baphomet. It actually looks like Baphomet, and they actually have pentagrams, the whole 9 yards. You heard about that, right?
No.
Okay, yeah. No, is
it airing on CNN or?
No, this one's actually the Disney Channel. So anyway,
it's because really quick, Lithia, it's because it's not about the cross. The cross was an example of what he did for us, but it is not Jesus himself. So you certainly, when you talk about praying to the cross, again, very much steeped in Catholicism, and is yet another pathway according to them and some other religious religious sects as well. But no, pray to Jesus himself, because that's what was intended for sure. That doesn't mean that you can't wear a cross, right?
Right.
I have a particular cross that hangs in my truck. It has nothing to do with being prayed to or anything else like that. It actually hangs with my Batman symbol, which Jason can tell you. So it is not that.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea there is, again, your relationship with Jesus and God, and being one and the same, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But that's your prayer. That's where you're going to.
Right. No, exactly. We pray to Jesus. The cross is just a symbol. It reminds us of what he did for us.
Yep.
Right. And then it's not him himself. All right, guys. This was great. We'll do this again. Again tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Don't worry, Mr. D Knuckle. Next Sunday we're going to have a lot of fun discussing what you threw at me, because it really is an interesting thing.
I'm going to go protest Disney.
Yeah, let's go protest. You know what? Okay. No. You're
done with the show. I'm joking.
We're done. Yeah, we're done with the show. All right, we'll talk about that later. All right, guys, y'all be good. We'll see you tomorrow.